In this episode of the Smart Community Podcast, I have a great conversation with Alan Murphy. Alan is the Smart Dublin Regional Lead. Smart Dublin is an initiative of the 4 Dublin Local Authorities to engage with smart technology providers, researchers, and citizens to solve challenges and improve city life. In this episode, Alan tells us about his background in IT consulting and his passion for new ways of doing things using technology. He tells us what sparked his interest in the smart space, including a friend of the podcast, Jonathan Reichental, who you might remember from episode 77. Alan and I then discuss what Smart Dublin actually is and some of the projects that Alan's been working on with Smart Dublin in the areas of mobility, environment, energy, and citizen engagement. Alan shares with us how he sees Ireland embracing smart concepts and the maturing of the conversation around smart communities. We talk about integration, and Alan explains Smart Dublin's collaborative approach, plus we cover the power of having champions and stakeholders involved from the start. We finish our chat discussing the emerging trends in the mobility space of commute time now being considered by employers, and of incentivising more sustainable modes of transport. As always, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
Welcome to the Smart Community, Smart Regions, Smart Towns and Smart Cities. It's where we live, work and play. With smart communities, the future starts today. Big data, smart mobility, emerging trends galore. The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.
Hello, Alan. How are you today?
Zoe, hi. Good morning. I'm good.
That's so good to hear, and I'm so glad that you could come onto the podcast.
Pleasure. Happy to get involved.
Well, let's jump straight in, and can you tell us about your background and what you're passionate about?
Okay. To zoom in on the passion bit, I would say I'm very passionate about looking at new ways of doing things and using new technology. So my background was in IT consulting, so doing large-scale enterprise applications, implementations, mainly using SAP software, which involves huge disruption and huge change for any organization that's introducing that kind of new technology. So that's my background. That gave me a good grounding in challenging the status quo, teasing out new business models, understanding how technology can be used to drive efficiencies. And then one of the projects akin to that, but very different, was in the smart metering space, where I was on the national program to introduce smart meters in Ireland. So every domestic household will have a new electricity meter and a new gas meter. So I got a real feel for the energy sector, and I thought, okay, that this smart stuff is really interesting. And then, coincidentally, I was at a conference where Jonathan Reichental, I think you might know him.
I do very well.
Yeah, he was in town talking about smart cities, and I was just blown away. I thought it was really, really interesting space to get into. And then I met one of the local guys here, Jamie Cudden, who's been running the Smart City program, and conversations were had, and it's led to me joining the Smart Dublin team. So here I am.
Excellent. And so I guess that kind of answers the next question about what sparked your interest in this smart community space. So was it, listening to Jonathan, but then, having that background of IT and then the smart metering, all that kind of coming together to really get you really interested in this space? Is that kind of what happened?
Yeah. Throw in maybe a mini midlife crisis as well. That might have been part of it. What's it all about? And I suppose when I was looking for a career pivot, I was reflecting back on some of the projects I'd been involved in over the years, and a theme started to come out quite strongly through some of the projects I've worked on, where the end game of what we were doing had a real substantial impact on society. So society was going to benefit somehow from the project I was working on. So smart metering, for example, will help reduce energy consumption domestically across Ireland and any other country that rolls out smart metering. The other project I worked on previously, I mentioned SAP software. So once upon a time, I worked in Rome with the United Nations, the World Food Programme. And that was all about trying to trace how donations from countries, especially the States and Canada, got to crisis parts of the world. So we had to design a whole system to look after that process. So again, the end game was very fulfilling, if you like. So then when I heard Jonathan's talk, I thought, gosh, okay, definitely it ticks that box. And that was a big reason for me to join the Smart City team.
Excellent. I love hearing about people's, aha moments or, really, I guess, following your drive and your passion in this space. And yeah, it's really exciting to talk to other people that are really passionate about it in the sense of, that end game of really benefiting the community, I guess.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that sort of aha moment or what's it all about, like if you have the option to spend your energy into something like smart cities where we're trying to deliver projects and, get cities running more efficiently where everybody would benefit. I mean, I feel really lucky to be in a situation that my time and energy can be put in through work, can deliver that kind of value to society. So it's a good place to be. Yeah.
I agree. And I feel like I am also very fortunate to be in the same position where my work can contribute to that. It really, I guess, add to the community and I guess contribute is the word, contribute to society and hopefully make things better for people. Yeah,
100%. And, the way we work here at Smart Dublin and talking to other cities to try and deliver some of the projects we're working on, you can only do that through collaboration. So innovation through collaboration. So, our work is very, very external focused, if you say that. We have a fantastic ecosystem in Dublin where we collaborate with a variety of stakeholders to deliver these projects and working with so many different stakeholders in town just gives you a great insight as to how Dublin is functioning. So it's that's also really, really a nice part of the job.
So what is a smart city to you?
Oh, what is a smart city to me? Gosh, it's a tricky one to define, isn't it? You've probably asked that question to everyone in your podcast, and you see different definitions of it. I saw one in The Guardian recently. They had an article about, well, a smart city could be a dumb city, and all we need to do is just go back to nature. So a whole rewilding of cities and go back to basics. So that's one view. A smart city to me is, well, let's just leap ahead for a second. It's a city that's people focused, it's clean, it's safe, and that's kind of the vision. And then for that to happen, that the smart element of it might be that the city just runs very efficiently to deliver that kind of lifestyle. So then you start breaking that down to some of the nuts and bolts that we work on. So vast improvements needed around mobility, clean, sustainable mobility, the whole energy efficiency theme, that all needs to be based on renewable energy, and the idea of positive energy blocks where you're producing more than you're consuming, for example. Citizens are more engaged with government, so citizens' voices are heard and the processes are efficient to allow that to happen. And from the government side, really pushing the whole transparency agenda so that everything government do is open and people are clear as to how the city is being administered. So there's a lot in that, but that I think would be an amazing city to live in. What do you think?
I think that'd be pretty good. Yeah. And I think coming back to, what you first said, which is about the people. So as much as we can improve efficiencies, which, and I'm really passionate about improving efficiencies within government, I think we don't talk about it enough because the savings that you can get, so then you can actually focus on making life better for people, but also decreasing, like you said, with energy, decreasing energy use, which for a single household might not seem very much, but then if you scale that over a whole country, then we can have significant impact. So I think looking at those things and that they're not completely separate. That I think we talk a lot about, community benefits, and then we kind of talk about operational benefits as separate things, but actually, particularly for, if you're talking about a government level and improve efficiencies within government, they're one and the same. Because I think then we can have better jobs, more creativity, that curiosity piece. We can do that research. We can have, funding for things that are really important to people that we may not think we have resources, for now, because we're all of our funding's tied up in things that could potentially be much more efficient. So yeah, I think it's coupling those things together is really important in this space.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. I really want to get into the governance structure of Smart Dublin and how you work with the different councils and Enterprise Island and all that type of stuff. But first of all, I'll just quickly talk about why we think the smart city or smart community concept is so important.
It's everything you described there about, if a city is run efficiently, everybody feels it. So, and you can almost feel it when you go to different cities. You get a sense of, oh, this place seems to be running itself well. So getting a city to run efficiently just makes sense from all the points that you just mentioned, which is around citizens getting value out of it and it's better quality of life and all that stuff. And then internally for government bodies to really drive efficiencies. That's, I think, understood. There's something that about each city, and you know this around the world, has probably got any city you can think of probably has a smart city program in place. We're starting to think that we play a role of sort of a custodian role or an oversight role to just keep an eye on how all these new technologies are being deployed, because it's coming at cities in waves, and to sort of make sure that things are done in a controlled way. Each city's smart city program can play that kind of custodian role to tease out, well, okay, I see what the technology can do, but is it the right thing to do? What are the use cases and value that it will actually deliver? So a lot of our conversations move very quickly from a show and tell on the technology to, what could be the business model here? Who are the stakeholders involved? What data is being collected? Is it proportionate to the use case? And so teasing it through what the business model is going to be is key. So I think we play a role in sort of safeguarding the community, if you like, and ensuring that technology is used in the most appropriate way.
Okay, cool. Well, that kind of starts that conversation about what Smart Dublin actually is. Can you talk about how it was set up, what the governance kind of looks like, and then we'll talk about some of the projects that you've been working on?
Yeah, so Smart Dublin was set up in 2016. So in Dublin County, they decided to create 4 different administration structures. So think 4 different councils. So those 4 councils came together under the Smart Dublin umbrella and recognized that there's huge opportunities to work together on exploring the new opportunities that the new technologies offer. So it's very much a collaboration forum where we work together to try and tackle the urban challenges that we're all facing globally: mobility, energy, citizen engagement, environmental controls, etc. So my role is as regional lead, working with all 4 different councils. Each council would have their own respective smart city team. And then I would report upwards to a chair of the Smart Dublin Forum, which would be one of the chief executives of one of the councils. And then, of course, I would report into the 4 chief executives on a regular basis as well. Feeding into that governance structure, we obviously want to know what our ecosystem is saying. So on a project by project basis, we would identify the right stakeholders that are needed to deliver a project from the academic world, from industry. So break industry into typically big tech companies and tech startups, plus citizens as well. I think we need to do more citizen engagement, but they're obviously a key voice in all of this. So we talk to them on a project by project basis, but then we need to do, and we have done in the past, sort of workshops with those stakeholders in the room to say, well, what could 2020 for Smart Dublin look like, for example? So we had something called an advisory network in place where there was reps from those different stakeholders in a room to help us figure out a roadmap. I think going forward, we might do more focus sessions with citizens on, well, what's a smart city mean for you, for example. So it's the 4 councils together with a lot of inputs from external stakeholders.
And how is it funded?
Okay, so funding comes in all different shapes and forms. So the funding of people, let's say, on the Smart City teams and the Smart Dublin team would come from the councils. Then project funding, you mentioned Enterprise Ireland and other semi-state bodies, and indeed central government here in Ireland, they can provide innovation funding, you might call it that. So we would submit an application into those bodies to say, we have this use case or this problem, this is the project, these are the people that be involved, and can you provide some funding? And actually there's a big drive from central government in particular to really drive the innovation agenda. So that's a welcome shift in the last couple of years. And then there's EU funding. The EU are very keen on the smart city space, and they also provide funding to the academic stakeholders I mentioned to allow them to do research papers around some of the projects that we do. And then, you know, when we're talking to industry and they want to trial with some of their solutions in the real life environment, in fact, that's a kind of a mantra for us at Smart Dublin. Instead of writing a report about how something might work, we're very much into deploying kit or solutions in the real life environment and learn by that deployment. So putting sensors, putting flooding sensors along the river, for example, you know, putting smart radar sensors on traffic lights in certain junctions, and really testing it in the real life environment, so that the funding can sometimes come from the private sector where they see the commercial opportunity to test their new technology in Dublin in the real life environment. And they have a fantastic story then to say at the end of it, to say, look, we've done this in Dublin. It's a great reference site for them. And then away they go. So the funding comes from different places.
Excellent. So tell us about some of the projects and things that you're currently working on. Yeah,
okay. So it's probably aligned to the smart city themes that I'm sure you're familiar with. So under mobility, for example, we're looking at mobility as a service and mass. And I know there's been many podcasts from yourself about this topic. I think it's fair to say every city is looking at this. Where we're at in Dublin, there's definitely an appetite across the stakeholders to do this, from the public and private operators. We need to do a deep dive workshop to get beyond the high level understanding of mass, to really tease out, okay, if we're going to do this, what does the business model look like? Who would like to do what aspect of the value chain of mass? How mature are we in the different areas that make up that value chain? And what do we need to do to unlock the expected benefits? So that's something hopefully by Q1 this year we'll have done. And again, it plays into what I was saying about engaging with the right stakeholders. That's program management 101. If you get buy-in from the right stakeholders, you're off to a good start. EV charging points is another item on our table. So the local authorities will play a role as to where we should put EV charging points around the city. 80% of charging will happen at home, but you have certain housing arrangements in Dublin where people will not have off-street parking. So you don't have a driveway, basically. So for those people, and you'd like people to switch to EVs where it makes sense, to offer some facility for them to charge overnight. The local authorities can play a role in installing EV charging points in the right locations in the suburban areas. So that's another significant project on my table. Shall I keep going?
Yeah, I think people are really interested in the projects you're doing. So yeah, keep listing. And even if you want to talk about some of the projects that, you've done in the past as well that were successful or, had lessons learned.
Okay. On the environmental side, we've got a network of flooding sensors, some 91 sensors of different types, river sensors, tidal sensors, rainfall sensors around the city, all feeding into an open data portal where people can see how those sort of hotspots are flooding activities are being controlled. On the environmental side, again, we deployed a number of gully sensors, so drains basically around the city in certain hotspots where these drains can sometimes get clogged up. So I think a small Internet of Things sensor under the drain, it's not really visible from the street level. And it's sending back a simple data package back to HQ to say, I'm empty or I'm filling up or I'm completely full. And then the field staff can go out and unblock the drains that are obviously filling up or blocked. Very simple use case, but it all feeds into what we were saying earlier on about operational savings from the council. On the energy side, an exciting project, which fingers crossed will happen with the energy provider in the smart home space here in Ireland, where we're looking at ways to channel renewable energy that would normally be curtailed by our grid operators and channel that renewable energy into social housing stock to heat hot water tanks. So this would be a low, maybe a free, but definitely a low cost tariff energy channel into social housing stock to heat their hot water tanks. So again, a fantastic way to reduce energy consumption. And this would be the consumption of energy renewable energy that would ordinarily not be available on the grid.
Can you explain that in a bit more detail? How does that work?
Yeah, so we've made some good strides in Ireland around renewable energy. So a lot of wind turbine farms have been constructed. On a good day, the grid can be made up of, I think, 70% of renewable energy. I've seen some sort of metrics of that, but the energy can't be stored. So the grid operators have to manage the grid in terms of how much renewable energy is allowed onto the grid. It's in load balancing. What this opportunity or this channel to a new energy consumption customer, if you like, allows that if there is a significant amount of renewable energy available, that more of that can be fed into the grid and channeled down this stream to this new end customer, which is social housing stock to heat hot water tanks. So does that give you an idea?
Yeah. Yep.
So that's really interesting. Hopefully we can work with the company involved to make that happen. On citizen engagement, we again engage with the private sector to do some social listening as to what people on Twitter are saying about things in their different councils. So we produce a report. Again, this is all in the public domain as to what the chatter has been in each of the councils around transport, around community and culture, environmental concerns, whatever it might be. It's just a fantastic way for the council to understand, well, what are people concerned about? And it's a big shift away from surveys and, you can't beat town halls and face-to-face sessions, of course, but this is just another way to gauge the pulse of the Dublin region. So, the list goes on, but that gives you a flavor across different themes as to what we're trying to achieve.
That's awesome. And how do you think that Dublin, or Ireland, I should say, how do you think Ireland is currently, I guess, embracing this concept? I think we've talked about that a little bit, but do you think that Ireland is picking it up more quickly than other places, or, how has the maturity kind of changed over time? Yeah,
it's, I think we're doing pretty good, You might be able to tell me offline after this call, because you've talked to so many cities. And like we get a lot of international delegations that come here, and we collaborate. And as you know, the collaboration with cities is really good in the smart city space. I think Dublin is well positioned to innovate in this area. And because of the ecosystem I mentioned, there's when we talk to citizens about some of the stuff we're doing, they're really engaged and they want to get involved. We're starting to see a lot more projects involving crowdsourcing of data. So be it tree mapping to, accessibility issues for buildings. There's just been a recent deployment of car counting sensors where people can install these sensors in their own homes. You're going to sort of look at the rough sleeper alert process that we have, where people can flag to councils that there's a rough sleeper in a certain part of town, and then the outreach team can go out and engage with that person to try and find them shelter for the night. So the engagement from citizens is quite powerful. Then what also Dublin has got going for it is the technology sector is quite strong here. And I suppose what I would add to that is it's not too big and not too small. So I like to use the Goldilocks analogy. It's a nice size to attract the private sector who see commercial opportunities in the smart city space. And it's not too big or unwieldy that you have to have 101 stakeholders around the table to make something happen. So from a number of dimensions, Dublin is well positioned to really progress in this area. And I think we're doing good. Other cities are telling us that we're doing good. But there's always room for improvement. There's always more to do.
So I think what Smart Dublin does particularly well is that integration piece across, disciplines. We talk about academia, those government agencies, bringing in industry. So how do you think that we can do that in a better way, I guess, around the world? Because I'm thinking you guys must have some tricks and techniques that you use to get people in the room and collaborate. So can you share some of those?
Yeah, I suppose top tip would be just build relationships with these people. That can be a big ask in the bigger cities. And I think we're lucky in Dublin that, for example, we have a single public transport authority. So we don't have 100, there's only one. It's a national transport authority. So to progress some of the mobility stuff, we're building relationships there. The single distribution system operator in the utilities space, and that's a national system operator as well. So we're building relationships there. For me, it's down to the people relationships, and of course, an understanding as to strategically what's important for those organizations. So that's what we try and do, is promote, we'll figure out who's who and just invite them to the conversation early. And we also see that with our internal stakeholders. So a lot of the projects we do, there's a need to line up an internal champion, if you like, to embrace how a new public service might be delivered. So let's say waste management, for example, and the introduction of the smart bins, and a big problem we have around illegal dumping. Having the subject matter expert from the relevant department involved in the project early on, they feel they're co-designing the project with us, as opposed to us doing the project and then handing it back to them, and they're kind of wondering, okay, well, is this going to work or not? So that would be another tip, to involve the ultimate recipients of the new way of working, involve them from the outset. So it's people building relationships with external stakeholders, collaborating with them openly, and involving people early. That would be my tip for the day.
I agree. And I think also, as an outsider looking in, just the way that the governance is set up allows for that collaboration. Obviously the people are important, and, you can't just set up governance and then walk away and, expect it all to work. But the resources and the focus that has been allocated in Smart Dublin, and then those, relationships and partnerships that you've built, allows for this integration that other places are looking for. And I think that's why Dublin gets so much global attention, And, people go there, and why I went there and why I talk about it a lot is just setting up of that resources and focus and legitimacy of smart cities. Whereas other places really struggle to get everyone on board. Whereas that's your whole job, I guess, is to facilitate that collaboration, which that's a huge struggle for other countries and cities that I've spoken to, and other agencies as well.
Yeah, and I would say in a bigger city, it's really hard to do the people relationship stuff because you don't have time to build that face-to-face kind of connection. It can be very difficult. And also, I think what we found is you can't boil the ocean. So you start in bite sizes and you create a bit of credibility. So you start with project number one on use case number one, working with who you think are the right stakeholders, and word of mouth can be powerful. We're now seeing that because of the variety of projects we're doing and openly collaborating with other organizations, some organizations that we haven't approached yet are coming to us to say, hey, can you work with us? So that pattern is starting to snowball, which is fantastic.
Yeah, and I think that's so important as well, that's very basic stuff, that very traditional, that's how things used to spread by word of mouth. And I think it's really important, and going back to what you were talking about is building relationships. That's really key to then, if someone's talking about it, they're talking about it for a reason. So then everyone else thinks they need to talk about it too, because it's really, it's a trendy thing to be talking about. But when there's substance underneath it, then that's when you get that real traction. So, starting those smaller kind of, well, they call them like no regrets or low hanging fruit or quick wins to kind of get that traction, and then building those relationships with people and then showing some results as well is really, really key.
Yeah, absolutely. And showing results, that's the challenge sometimes we get here. It's kind of the exam question. Okay, guys, you're doing all this innovation. Where is the impact? And as you know, smart city programs can be guilty of, death by pilots. And we have to deliver value that's understood. So what we're just kicking off now is a whole program kind of review to come up with a methodology so that we can calculate the value of each of the projects we're working on. A value comes in different shapes and forms. There can be financial value in terms of the operational savings in delivering a service, but the qualitative side of things, so the societal impact of some of the projects we're doing, to articulate those. So I'm really keen that we come up with that robust methodology so that I can easily say to someone in a one-line way, this is the value of what we're doing. And if we can do that, it plays into things like security of funding or attracting more funding, or we get more projects onto our portfolio. So that's really important.
Yeah, no, I agree. And okay, let's talk about emerging trends. What are the emerging trends that people aren't talking about enough?
Okay, what we're seeing here in Dublin in the mobility space is a lot of large organizations are starting to reflect on how their staff are commuting to work and indeed moving around the city during the day. So the whole, like Dublin struggles and suffers from high levels of congestion. So, and most people are commuting single occupancy vehicles for considerable time to their workplace. So employers, what we're seeing, and think large scale employers, a few hundred employees and upwards, are really starting to reflect on, well, what's the impact on their employees of their respective commutes? We're trying to figure out mobility at a city-wide level, but we're seeing organizations really thinking about the well-being of their staff, the logistics around how they get to the workplace. It also feeds into what I've heard about recruitment conversations, that for certain employers that want to hire or target employees, when the location and the commute consideration pops up, it can be a blocker because it's just doesn't work for the target employee. So we're passing the message, are trying to come up with ways to help organizations have this conversation. And the first thing to do is just do an as-is assessment of, well, how are their staff commuting to work? And if you get the data based on actual facts, it can then allow that organization to introduce, innovative ways to help staff get to work, be it carpooling, shuttle buses, changing working hours, whatever makes sense for that organization. So it's great to see that thinking happening, and if everybody kind of does their bit, then the city benefits in a broader way. So yeah, we'd like to see more of that, and we're having real conversations with organizations about this.
No, I really like that. And I think it's such an important topic, and something I talk about a lot as well is that commute, how the commute affects our daily lives. And I think more and more now that work expectations are changing and, increasing remote working and flexibility and all those type of things. But as a kind of a worker or a freelancer or an employee, but then on the other side, what is the employer doing to take into consideration these changing trends and things that are moving in a certain way? So yeah, it's a really good point.
Yeah, and just a final thing on that, maybe what we're not talking enough about, certainly in Ireland, is, let's introduce some reward schemes to reward people for choosing more sustainable modes of transport. And that could be via central government, through the taxation process. Like the rewards don't have to be localized or within the organization. And there's lots of examples out there, but take it up to the macro level that the solutions out there can validate travel trips and all that good stuff. So the data will be there to allow financial rewards back to employees for choosing sustainable modes of transport. And I think that's a conversation that needs to happen in Ireland. We're hearing that it's working in countries like the Netherlands and so on. So, let's have the conversation here.
Yeah, no, so true. And yes, thank you for picking something about mobility, because I love talking about mobility.
Okay.
Well, Alan, it's been so great to chat with you. Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. Well, I just have one last question, which is, how can people connect with you?
Okay. Yeah. So we've got a website. Have a look at that, smartdublin.ie. We're on Twitter. I've got, there's a Smart Dublin LinkedIn page as well. I've got my own LinkedIn page. Happy to receive in any messages and figure out how we can deliver real value to society. That's what this is all about. Excellent.
We'll put all the links in the show notes so people can click away and find you. Thank you again for coming onto the podcast.
My pleasure, Zoe.
We'll definitely talk soon. Bye.
Okay, Zoe. See you. Bye.
Bye.
Are you looking for an engaging speaker, MC, or facilitator for your next big event? Then we've got you covered. Zoe is a go-to speaker, MC, and conversation facilitator with a difference. She's a master at simplifying the complex and making connections you might never see. Book Zoe for your next event. Email hello@mysmart.community or head over to her speaker page, www.mysmart.community/speaking.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart Community Podcast. Show notes for this episode and all other episodes are available on our website, mysmart.community/podcast. If you have any questions for us or any of our guests, you can email hello@mysmart.community. You can also find us on the socials. We are on LinkedIn and Twitter @SmartComHQ. That's com with 2 M's. If you are enjoying the podcast, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we would love for you to leave us a rating and review at wherever you listen. This really helps us reach more ears and eyes, so thank you for your support. As always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.